Assess the China situation because you have many critics, you have many criticisms, not just fictional ones, but you have ones that are very valid criticism of what went on in China.
We've put a ton of effort into taking overtime down.
In China, violence erupted at the world's largest iPhone factory.
It sounds easy to people in the audience. This is actually hard because it's complex, because some people want to work a lot.
As hundreds of workers fought with authorities over a benefits dispute and COVID-19 restrictions.
We're measuring working hours for 700,000 people. And so we're micromanaging that. And we're showing a level of care that I don't see in other places.
As you've probably heard already, Apple isn't having the best time right now in China. And from what I'm about to show you in this video, it's pretty clear that they are breaking up. The story of Apple in China goes way back, many years and even decades ago. And today, most of the iPhones being produced are produced in China. And no matter how you spin it, the main reason is for Apple to save money on labor. Of course, because Chinese labor is a lot less expensive than US labor. Just look at the story of this NYU student who spent 6 weeks working undercover in an iPhone factory. He spent 12 hours a day putting in one screw into an iPhone nonstop. That's all he did. He mentioned that most of the workers there can't actually afford a new iPhone. He mentioned being yelled at in trial productions being the worst, almost like torture. And he said that 6 weeks on the assembly line only paid about $450, not even enough to buy an iPhone. And that's even with working 6 days a week, only getting Sundays off. And if you're wondering about the cost difference between a US worker and a Chinese worker, check out this clip from 10 years ago.
While the average worker building electronics in the US today makes over $23 an hour and works 41 hours a week, most of the people at Foxconn earn just over $2 an hour and strive for a 60-hour work week.
Now, of course, that was 10 years ago, so the wages are a little bit different these days, but the point is that Apple is saving a ton of money with Chinese workers working more hours and making over 10 times less than a US worker. So because of all of that, Apple has been enjoying some steep profit margins on their iPhones for many, many years with great success, but then came Trump. He came into the office and he put a lot of blame on China, which kickstarted the trade war with sanctions on products from China, which impacted both the Chinese economy and even the US economy as well. And it had a lot of negative impacts on companies, specifically putting a lot of pressure on Apple because Apple relies on China more than pretty much any other company out here in the States. And here's where it got really tricky for Apple. The Trump-imposed tariff of 25% on electronic goods could mean that the price of the iPhone XS would have went up by $160. So this could have hit Apple massively. And just looking at a stat from 2019, 92% of Apple products made in China could face tariffs by the end of that year. So Apple started to get a little bit clever and it got to work specifically with the Mac Pro. They announced that Apple's new Mac Pro would be made in Texas. Yes, made in the USA. And apparently, Tim Cook even gave the first Mac Pro in production to Trump. Of course, he was sucking up to him, trying to make friends, trying to make a deal, and then guess what happened? Apple dodged the iPhone tariff after Trump confirmed the trade deal agreement with China. Apple barely got around it, and I think it was because of that Mac Pro stunt. But here was the catch to the whole Mac Pro thing. The assembled in USA Mac Pro was actually made in China for international customers. So basically, it was just a big PR stunt and it worked. And to prove that, let me give you a sneak preview of what's happening with the upcoming Apple Silicon Mac Pro. Apple is planning to move Mac Pro production completely out of the US now that Trump is gone over to Asia. But guess what? Because of everything that's going on that I'm gonna show you in this video, they are moving it to Vietnam and not China. So luckily, Apple was able to dodge that bullet and everything was working just fine and successful for the last couple of years until 2022, where things got a lot more tough for Apple. On November 21st, Apple announced that they're extending the wait time for their popular iPhone 14 models beyond Christmas as their iPhone factory Foxconn scrambles to resume full production in Zhengzhou. And if you don't know why that happened, well, it's because of another lockdown in China, and because of that, there was some bad protests.
They are images that rarely make it out of China. Open dissent. Protesters facing off with police at a factory some have called iPhone City.
And that of course put a lot of pressure on Tim Cook and Apple, with him in this video refusing to answer questions on the Chinese people's right to protest, shutting off airdrop access in China used by protesters, and iPhone factory workers who were beaten and detained for protesting the lockdowns. And then it got even worse because market analysts were lowering their iPhone shipment estimates based on all of these lockdowns, like Credit Suisse, and then another one from Morgan Stanley cutting their iPhone production estimate by 3 million units. And of course, Apple's stock was taking a hit over these Chinese protests. And then things took an even worse turn for Apple because they had to comply with the Chinese Communist government, the CCP, and they actually suppressed the protests by releasing a software update that limited the use of airdrop in China to slow all the information down. They even removed apps that helped the protesters track the police, and they banned political engravings on its devices in China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. So Apple actually had to help the government out as well. And with everything finally ending on November 30th, the lockdown ending, it was estimated that these protests were costing Apple $1 billion per week. But the political things got even worse because in 2021, Apple agreed to essentially make it an extortion payment to the Chinese government because of a 5-year deal they made. So basically that payment was to make sure that Apple would no longer run afoul of various Chinese economic regulations. So Apple has to jumble a whole lot of things in China right now between the communist government and the factories, everything. And the issue is that for many, many years, Apple made China the backbone of its iPhone assembly, and shifting away could take years, which is the problem that they're getting into right now. But guess what just happened on December 3rd? Apple made the announcement that they're making plans to move production out of China. And this commentary says that Foxconn must be a heck of a lot worse than they are telling us. To people saying it's not a big deal, they will move to India, everything will be fine, Foxconn manufactured and produced 70% of Apple's iPhones. That is huge. You can't just stop and pack away instantly. It's gonna take a lot of time.
Critics say Apple has put itself in a difficult situation with an extreme dependence on China as a manufacturer and as a consumer market.
But then the problems with China got even worse last year in 2022 with all of the political drama and issues with China and Taiwan, with China reaffirming threat of military force to annex Taiwan. Yes, that means take Taiwan back into the entire state of China, and of course that is hugely controversial, and many people are thinking that an invasion of Taiwan by China probably means World War III. And even Apple's chipmaker TSMC warned that Taiwan-China war would make everybody losers. And Taiwan even said that a Chinese attack would hit the global economy harder than the Ukraine war because TSMC in Taiwan supplies most of the world's chips. Everything comes from Taiwan. So if anything happens, that is going to be bad for the economy. So with that said, Apple of course wants to reduce the reliance on China. And guess what reports we've been getting over the last few weeks? The iPhone 15 Ultra will not be exclusively assembled by Foxconn. Yes, Apple's flagship will finally start production elsewhere outside of China, which is a hard thing to do. On top of that, exports of iPhones made in India will hit $3 billion as Apple slowly reduces dependence on China. So they're starting to outsource more and more into India. And check this out, we just got this piece of news. Major iPhone display supplier is gonna build a $250 million OLED factory in Vietnam. Yes, that's actually a Chinese company that's gonna go out to Vietnam instead of staying in China. And check this out, for the first time ever, Foxconn is gonna begin making MacBooks in Vietnam as early as May 2023. The first time ever getting out of China. And of course, we now have the Mac Pro that is no longer gonna be built in China for the international market, like I mentioned earlier. It is going to Vietnam. And finally, we have this chart of Apple's decoupling with China with the forecast of Apple products moving away from China. For example, about 55% of AirPods in China. By 2025, it's gonna be under 40%. The iPhone's gonna be under 80%. iPad, 80%, Apple Watch, 80%. iPhone cases are gonna go down 85%. And finally, MacBooks as well from 100% down. So, Apple is starting to get out of China, but the question is, how long is it gonna take and what's gonna happen between now and then? So let me know your thoughts and comments on this whole ordeal, all of this drama and issues happening in China. Let me know down in the comment section below. And if you wanna buy an Apple product that's not made in China, you can use the YouTube tagging feature right down below. Thanks for watching. Click the circle above for more videos like this one, and we'll see you in the next video.